would you put me out at 14910? Be making contact with the other half here.
In the suspicious person, 4423 Live will get the mobile station, group of guys in an old cutlass. 10.
You couldn't be gay. It was the worst thing that you could be.
The straight out would call me, you're sick in the head, you have a mental illness. This is not normal. You're not a normal person.
Our field investigation has determined that you are a homosexual. How do you respond to this charge?
We were interrogated like prisoners of war. You know, we were thrown in the back of a car, driven to an undisclosed area, interrogated for hours and hours.
My war was within the military, the Canadian Armed Forces.
And I remember telling them in one of the interviews, I said, you can't do this. I said, this is Canada. And he looked me in the eye and he said, we're the military, we can do what we want.
Prior to World War II, there was no security screening in the Federal Civil Service. And even during World War II and shortly after World War II, there was no security screening. And then the Guzenko defection happened.
In your opinion, sir, and in your experience, is sex and such things part of the spying game?
Yes, definitely.
You know, on September 5th, 1945, Igor Guzenko walked out of the Soviet embassy. He was a lowly cipher clerk, and stuffed under his shirt were 108 documents that found its way to the RCMP. It revealed that the civil service had been widely penetrated by it was then called the NKVD, later the KGB. And that started the whole process of looking at the backgrounds of the people who were working for the government. And after that, the civil service was never the same again.
Canada was very naive, and we thought that, you know, who would bother spying on Canada? You know, who would care? And then we find out that there's a communist spy ring being run out of the House of Commons by Fred Rose, who is the communist MP. And I think it really freaked people out.
The government responded and started to clamp down. And so security screening was introduced in 1948. And that opened the door to just snooping and prying. And the authorities in the West figured, okay, the KGB is going to start looking for people with secrets to hide.
It's like someone, you know, is cheating on their partner, someone is gambling. I mean, there's a whole bunch of possible ways in which someone could have a character weakness, right? Or some sort of addiction. But the one that the Canadian state focuses on is homosexuality.
It was the key focus, not just a focus, it was the focus, you see. The Mounties were like extremely right-wing, very conservative, and they just had a visceral detestation of homosexuality, and they saw it as a moral failing.
Societies around the world have discriminated against sexual minorities since time immemorial. What happened after the Second World War was You had the Red Scare, the communist menace, better dead than red, and the fear that perverts were infiltrating our military and our public service, who were, well, to begin with, perverts, and who, secondly, would be at risk of blackmail from Soviet authorities and who would then become traitors to the country as well. So they needed to be identified and they needed to be rooted out. It was pernicious, it was obnoxious, and in some ways it was just scapegoating, but at least that was the fig leaf of justification that was used.
So I think you saw in the late 1940s this kind of social panic about there are communists everywhere, there are homosexuals everywhere, and that feeds into Senator McCarthy's very high-profile witch hunt against communists and against homosexuals, who were seen as virtually synonymous. And we become viewed as a security threat for the first time, but also as a threat to society because you never know who's a homosexual.
Ralph showed him some pornographic pictures. Jimmy knew he shouldn't be interested, but, well, he was curious. What Jimmy didn't know was that Ralph was sick, a sickness that was not visible like smallpox, but no less dangerous and contagious, a sickness of the mind. You see, Ralph was a homosexual, a person who demands an intimate relationship with members of their own sex.
So the national security campaign in Canada really picks up at that point in time. The ostensible reason from the government's vantage point is that we supposedly suffer from a character weakness and therefore are a threat and risk to national security and should not be in employment, right? We're not trustworthy, we're not reliable workers, we should actually be purged from the public service.
And at that time, the RCMP would gather paid information. I had a friend that worked for the RCMP and told me that they needed a forklift to lift my file.
That's an indication of what the RCMP also begins to describe in some of their internal documents. They describe how the previous gay informants they had started to clam up, wouldn't talk anymore, right, to them, wouldn't give them information. Now, it's not entirely clear to us whether they gave people money for information, but they certainly would grill people about, have you been to a party, any gay parties lately? Were there any public servants there? Who were they? That was a standard line of questioning.
There was a famous theater called the Rialto and the Lord Elgin Hotel, and the RCMP would stand outside and take pictures of all the people coming and going and accumulated an album.
When the purge really took off in 1958, John Diefenbaker, of all people forget, he had the Bill of Rights. He was a criminal defense lawyer. He actually believed in human rights. He expressed concern about this, that maybe this was going too far, and he had some people look into it. But if you see the history of it from that point forward, it's like the RCMP is a force unto itself. Certainly politicians were aware of it from time to time, but I don't think they really controlled it. I think they were told, oh, this is top secret, it's very important, this is the way we do things.
What happened then, they said, well, we've got to find out who's gay.
They came up with all kinds of indicators.
If you wore a pinky ring, that was a fairly good indication. If you drove a white convertible, big indication.
If you go for a beer, you sit on the left. Always go to the left, never go to the right. Like the way you sit or the way you hold your cigarette, you don't want to appear gay or homosexual, so you got to look butch.
And the one I remember, don't sit with your legs crossed. Sit like this. Don't talk with your hands. Don't put your hands near your face.
My old sergeant, she was told when she first got in the military not to go play sports with the other girls because she would be tagged as a lesbian. Apparently, us lesbians are very sporty. I don't know.
And the other one was I couldn't understand this till I thought about it. Don't breast your books. Is when you carry a binder, don't hold it up like over your breast. Carry it at your side like man.
But in those days, we had to be careful. You know, you didn't want to appear fifi.
Having to learn, in a certain sense, how to perform yourself as being heterosexual, at least at work, right? So, I mean, these are practices that people had to engage in, right? If they wanted to maintain their jobs in the military or in the public service, they had to continue to try to construct themselves as being heterosexual.
There was the official policy, and then there was the de facto policy. The de facto policy was that if you were homosexual, you were out. It was just, that's what it came down to. You were out. There was no discretion, and the Mounties got really carried away with this.
And at that time, I was arrested by the RCMP. And the RCMP picked me up, and they said that they wanted to interrogate me. And of course, because I was brave, I wasn't afraid of the devil. My family knew I was gay. My boss knew I was gay. I was a well-known hairdresser, and I was a drag queen. That I feared the RCMP, not unless they pull my nails off. And they got me there, and I said, "Is this what you want to see?" And I put down my drag pictures, and they said, "Yes." They said, "We have a file on you, and you're the most notorious gay person in Ottawa." And they had about 100 albums of gay, presumably male, in these albums, and they wanted me to put a name to them. They were under the impression that gay males would be blackmailed by the Russian, and I told the RCMP that I wasn't going to give up names, and they said, "Well, you're a traitor to our country." Well, I said, "I'd rather be a traitor to our country than a traitor to my friends," and I never divulged a single name. And when I finished, I said, "Fuck you very much."
The RCMP would walk into a workplace and say, you, follow me. And then said, "If you don't resign, we're outing you." And then firing you. So we don't know how many people then it would have appeared in the records as resignation, as opposed to dismissal. So that would give you another whole cohort of people who were forced out of their job, blackmailed out of their job by the police.
So I was at work one day, and I got a phone call from the commissioner downstairs in the lobby saying, your presence is required down here. 2 members of the RCMP in full uniform were downstairs. So I had a bad feeling. Of course, I knew something was up. So I went down.
My supervisor told me, "You have an appointment next week, Thursday at 11 or something like that. Mr. So-and-so from the SIU would like to meet with you." And I asked, "Could you tell me what it's about?" And no, she couldn't, because she was never told what it's about. And you're never again to probe and to ask. You're just to obey and to follow the rules. And being a person who followed the rules for the most part, that's what I did. I went to headquarters that particular morning.
And they said, you have many friends, and if you can identify some of these friends that like the homosexuals. And I said, "Well, why are you doing this?" They said, "Well, we want to make sure that you don't get blackmailed." And I said, "Blackmailed? Why would I be blackmailed? I'm only a clerk."
And then he led me to this little room that he opened up with a key. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was little more than a storage space for a janitor or something. But it was just slightly big enough to have a little table and a light above the table, which just hung, like a bare bulb. And I had to stop myself almost from laughing out loud when I saw it. I couldn't believe you were actually going to sit in this little windowless, airless room.
Then they said, "We just want you to look at some photographs, okay?" And I did. So when I turned the photograph, it's about 4 inches thick. The book, there were 2 or 3 books, but the first book they turned, I saw myself with a group of my friends standing in front of a car. And I think they did this on purpose, because I couldn't very well say, "Well, I don't know them. I'm there."
And he began right off the bat, without anything that led up to it. It was just a clear-cut statement. "Our field investigation has determined that you are a homosexual. How do you respond to this charge?" But I was very surprised at the level of detail that he wanted to know certain things. He wanted to know about my personal life. He wanted to know who my friends were. He wanted to know names of people, especially in the government, and in particular in D&D. He wanted to know specifics about my sex life.
After I left there, I was kind of shaking. You know, I said to myself, why me?
It struck me since then that I've thought about it that, you know, security requires that you be trustworthy. But trustworthy is a product of dignity. And here is something that robs you of your dignity. So even if a person wasn't going to be militant in any way, here was some way to make you feel that you were not dignified. You weren't a human being. You weren't a full human being. So that's always stayed with me. And it's still hard. But I'm okay.
So it seems like this purge just developed a life of its own, and it became a cottage industry for the RCMP. I mean, my understanding is they had a whole floor at RCMP headquarters devoted to this special investigation unit that was doing security checks and investigating civil service people and so on. And I understand that perhaps as much as 90% of their work was looking for LGBT people. So a lot of people's jobs and careers depended on this purge continuing. And if it stopped, oh my God, all these people are going to be out of work.
They had this one program where they would look for places where homosexuals would assemble, you know, around the city of Ottawa. And they came up with this map. And they put dots. They figured, oh, this is an area where homosexuals go to. They put a red dot on there, and then they find another area, another red dots. And pretty soon the map was all red. You know, and they had to get a bigger map. So they got a bigger map. And it was all red too.
So they actually tried to argue for a new aerial map to be produced of Ottawa that would be much, much bigger. But I think the government decided not to fund this, right?
National Defense, to its credit, told them to go take a hike. They weren't going there.
What often would happen in the basement tavern of the Lord Elgin on Elgin Street. The basement tavern, by that point in time, was actually a major place where men went to meet other men. Public servants and non-public servants would be using that space. What became apparent to some of the gay men hanging out there was that every once in a while they would find someone come into the bar, put a newspaper up in front of them, which was certainly, first of all, really odd, right? This person wasn't establishing eye contact. They didn't seem to want to be there for the same reasons that other people were there. People would also then realize that there were holes cut in this newspaper and that this person was actually taking photographs of every person in the bar.
The stress level of even going to the bar. My girlfriend and I would go to the bars in Montreal, not even in Ontario.
We did go to the Montreal bar. If the fire had broken there, we would have all died. There was only one exit. It was a illegal bar.
And it was back in the day when you had to ring the doorbell and they would open the little latch and look.
And she'll look at you and say, yeah, okay, you can come in. So it was basement. But we were home.
I was very insecure, and it was very hard to make friends in the 50s when you were gay.
In our day, we used to, like, if we clustered more than 3 or 4 of us, we'd always look over your shoulder.
You had to learn how to behave and how to dodge the punches, because just for walking on the street, you had to find a route that was safe for you to navigate, because it was terrible to be gay in the 50s. I had a friend that worked for the parole board, and he was like an animal that was afraid to be in public. He said, oh, we can't go to the Honeydew, I might be photographed. I can't go here, I might be seen. And all the gay people that had important government position were petrified to socialize. They just socialized at house parties.
I think I realized years after the damage that it caused. Because, often I felt paranoid because you go, if the weekends we go to the gay bar in London, you always look over your shoulder. So you kind of develop not a paranoia, but fear. You're always in constant fear.
They were trying to look for more efficient ways of doing it, which is eventually what brought them to the fruit machine.
I remember this girl saying, oh yes, they can tell that you're gay. Really? How do people tell that you're gay? Oh, they have this thing, they have this machine, and it sees how your pupils dilate and so on. When you look at a picture of a naked man and your pupils will get larger, and that'll indicate an interest. And I was shocked, and I didn't know what to say about it.
This is the attempt by the government to determine and find a technology or a set of tests that would scientifically and objectively be able to determine who was gay or lesbian, and if you were identified as being gay or lesbian, you would be either refused employment or purged from your job, right? So from the 62, actually, until 67, 68, the Canadian government, with the mandate of the Security Panel and Cabinet, is actually involved in trying to develop this technology.
Bob Wake, he designed the tests. That was his job.
Dr. Wake was in the psychology department at Carleton University and was a major researcher who was brought in to work on the fruit machine research. First of all, he was sent to the States for, I think, most of a year to study the detection technology that existed there. And then he came back and produced a special project report, which they decided, we'll go with this and we're gonna fund it and pay for it.
The plan was to show basically dirty pictures of males in either nude or semi-nude to other males to see if this broadened their pupils.
I mean, it's a whole series of tests were part of the special project, including anxiety tests, sweat tests, word association tests, masculinity, femininity scales. But the core of it was a pupillary response test.
And this testing went on for years, like 3 or 4 years.
But of course, it never really worked. They were never able to get the numbers of research subjects they wanted, even such things as like the different distances between people's pupils in their eyes messed up the technology. During that period of time, there was this notion if we could have a psychological or psychiatric or scientific quick fix, it would actually really assist the campaign.
It strikes me as utterly ridiculous too. I mean, and so non-scientific that you'd wonder why they'd want to trust the results of such a test. And yet they seemed eager to.
It got to have a reputation, the fruit machine. And the guy who coined the term fruit machine was a sergeant in the RCMP named Vaughan Mackenzie. And he had a very wry sense of, sort of a quirky sense of humor. And he called it the fruit machine, and the name stuck, and it became the informal name that was used. And now the name has lasted decades later. That's how we know the name, because of Vaughan Mackenzie calling it the fruit machine at the time.
I mean, the fruit machine to me is kind of a metaphor for that era. It's the Cold War era, but also for the, what can you call it, kind of the pre-liberation gay world.
Take this thing on homosexuality. I think The view we take here is that there's no place for the state in the bedrooms of the nation, and I think that, what's done in private between adults doesn't concern the criminal code.
I believe that the purge actually increased after 1969 because I think the people running those government departments and the RCMP realized that their days were numbered, that it was no longer legitimate to get rid of LGBT people, and they had to hurry up and get rid of them as quick as possible.
At that point, there was a push to have women in the military. You know, the early 70s when feminism was just starting to have a little bit of pressure in the world. And
been wanting to be in the military since a child. I just grew up with this, I want to be a peacekeeper. I want to be like my uncle in the Second World War. I want to be like my uncle in the Korean War. I just want to help my country, defend my country, be there for my country. That was my goal.
First of all, they want to train you to become a warrior, to become a soldier in case of war. I felt like I belonged, and it was pretty, I enjoyed it a lot. I cannot say that it was a piece of cake or easy.
Get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, clean up yourselves, clean up the barracks.
You know, the crease in your pants have to almost cut your fingers. You know, the shine in your boots your teeth have to reflect in your boots. Then you know they're done. If you can see your teeth in your boots, they're done. They're perfect.
We had physical training, we had gun training, we had physical training.
Well, basic training is where you show your capability of being able to handle military work, because you go through a lot of physical activities, and also be able to take negative comments or just to see if you're strong enough.
I handled the rifle, the submachine gun, and the 9mm Browning, no problem. I went on to win the Skillet Arms Trophy, and that was the best shot in the platoon.
It was fun. It was all that a girl could dream of. Well, a girl who wanted to become a soldier, of course.
It was like finding a family. We were like, I think 52 young women, like between the age of 17 and 20 years old. Maybe some were a little older, but it's like, at the beginning, you're scared because you have no idea what to expect. Your first time you're leaving your house, your home, and people are yelling after you, telling you what to do.
I had a ball. Basic training for me was a party. The back of my Maverick, if that car could talk.
When I joined, I was 18. So I was just discovering myself. Just having fun and having a lot of friends. So that was awesome. And people, I mean, the women that I shared my platoon with, like, they were all sisters.
I was just happy to be part of something big, I think. To be accepted, to be me, and just loved for just doing something good.
When I went to Borden, there was 4 to a room with a little closet in the corner. So you had 4 women in the same room. So if you're already starting your, thinking that you might be attracted, you're throwing into an ideal situation for women. To me, it was the best time for being a woman in the military and exploring their sexuality, and the worst time.
I was quite green, I'd say. I did not have interest in boys. That I knew. I remember having a boyfriend who came when I was civilian. He came home, and then we brought him to the bus terminal. And my dad told me, I was sitting in the car. My dad told me, well, go to him. And what do you want me to do? Well, go kiss him goodbye. Why?
For me, I discovered that I like women. I think at that age, you're still exploring and still trying to figure out your life. And I was writing, I'll always remember the time I was in Borden. I was writing letters to a young woman that I fell in love with.
When the heart speaks, what can you do? And it was at once fantastic, but also almost terrifying, because I also knew that that was not conducive to a military career. And there were policies. I wasn't quite sure what the details were, but I knew it was something to be hidden.
In the public service, it wasn't quite as bad most of the time, aside from those very, very early years. But the stuff that happened to the military was in some ways sometimes more intense. Because you have to remember that this not only includes purging individuals, but a climate of violence.
We knew there was investigations on the base. We were hiding, in a sense, when you go and see a friend, a gay friend, you park 3 or 4 blocks from the place and you walk and you make sure nobody sees you. You don't want them to see where you go. I don't know why you do that, but you're just scared.
I know we hid it a lot. If they find out that you're gay, then they're gonna kick you out. So the seeds of fearfulness is planted.
So it was very much a matter of compartmentalizing your life to fit what you were in. When you were with your friends, you were this way. When you were at work, you were this way, because it was very dangerous to associate with these people. Just by rumor, you could be taken into the Special Investigation Unit and be interrogated.
They were going after their own. It was internal. I didn't go out on any mission. Like in Afghanistan, Desert Storm, I didn't do those places. My war was within the military, the Canadian Armed Forces.
The military had internal administrative disciplinary practices from at least World War II that explicitly would get rid of people who engaged in abnormal sexuality. So during World War II, thousands of people were actually purged from the Canadian military on the basis of having a psychopathic personality with abnormal sexualities. So you have this military campaign already pre-existing that purges sex deviates. And now you have, combined with that in the military, these national security practices.
The CFAO is a Canadian Forces Administrative Orders. That's compiled in about 20 books. It's huge. Then the Article 1920 showed up, was ordered by the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. Now we know that.
They called it homosexualism, sexual abnormality investigation, medical examination, and disposal. Disposal really marked me a long time, okay? Because I was disposed of, And in this law, they were putting that for the purpose of disorder, homosexual is one who has sexual propensity for person of his own sex. Sexual abnormality is form of sexual behavior and non-conforming with accepting moral standard or constituting an offense under the Criminal Code of Canada, voyeurism, exhibitionism, gross indecency, and bestiality. So we're comparing here homosexual with people that will have sex with animals.
So I'm sitting in the classroom having, again, a lecture of some kind. And then somebody knocks at the door and they said, Lapel, grab your stuff.
He opened the door. There were 2 guys standing there and dressed in civilian.
And they said, follow us. So I followed them outside.
And they blindfolded me.
Get inside the car. They got in front and they started driving. And in the first 5 minutes, I said, excuse me, why I'm here, you know? And he said, shut up. So I shut up.
They brought me to a shack that I still today don't know where it was.
I knew the base. It's 37 kilometers of circumference. There was 2 McDonald's, 2 golf. I knew the base. They brought me to a place that I never knew existed.
Picture the straight back chair with a bare table and 2 other chairs with 2 men interrogating you about your sex life. So it wasn't just, are you lesbian, and you admit it, yes, I am. It was like, okay, who, what, where, when, and how you did everything. And it kept repeating for hours, asking the same questions.
Started off asking very general questions, and I came right out and said, are you trying to ask if I'm a lesbian?
And I'm afraid. I'm 19 years old, and I'm being asked questions about who takes the garbage out in the relationship.
What do you do when you meet up with your friends? Do you hug? Do you kiss?
Do you like being kissed by a woman? Do you like being touched by a woman? Seeing a woman's breast, what does that mean to you?
Do you masturbate in the mirror? Do you use a dildo? I'm 19 years old. I'm discovering who I am, and I'm saying, what the hell is a dildo?
The questioning started, well, we heard that, whatever, you know, that you're a lesbian and, you know, you're not allowed to be in the forces. And so that was done. I said, no, denied it. And then they went to attack my sister. My baby sister at the time was in basic training. And they said, well, if you don't tell us, we're gonna go after your sister. And I said, okay, I'm gonna tell you what you wanna know, but you leave her alone.
It seemed like every week they were hauling me into that MP shack. Okay, time for some more questions. And ask me questions. Always sexually oriented questions.
And at first you say no, and what are you talking about? And you think you're real smart. You think you're gonna outsmart them.
And then I say, why are you saying that? I have a boyfriend, and I really try for the longest time to defend myself. To say, no, I have a boyfriend, I'm not seeing anybody else. And then they start, how many times you see him? How's your sexual relation with him? What's the intercourse? And they were going like this and that, like nonstop, and you're scared.
And then they start screaming. Okay, you're suspected of being a lesbian. We want names of all your friends, and we want them now, and you're not gonna get out of here until you talk. So you go, no, I'm not a lesbian. I tried it during English school, but I'm not a lesbian.
At one point, they say, if you're honest with us, we'll keep you. So, okay. Well, I'm confused. That was my honest thing is I had a girlfriend, I met a boy, I was with him, and then I met that woman, and it was just a first-time thing, and I'm 20 years old, and I'm not sure of my sexual orientation, and, you know, I was trying to find any exit, any way that they could believe me that I was not an homosexual. That this was just a fling, a trial, a thing like that I won't do it again, that I have a boyfriend and I'm straight, I'm not gay.
At one point, they leave you alone. They both leave the room. You're there, no water, but what's fumé, no smoking, and your brain just says, what's my crime here?
If I would have talked, the interview, the sequestration would have been over within an hour or two. No. I decided I was not gonna talk, and it lasted for 3 days.
They just held you in custody for hours and just asked you these repeated questions, circular questions over and over and over again. I think what they were trying to get at was, who else?
Michelle, it's not going to be a pleasant thing, I know for you, okay? There's always been a concern with people in the forces. How many gay people do you know?
Why are you concerned about how many people? You know, I'm dedicated, I work hard at my job. I don't get it.
I was subjected to this military policy of discrimination. So as my peers were advancing to the rank of lieutenant, then captain, and so on, I was still a second lieutenant. And imagine people would say to me, like, why aren't you being promoted? So it also had this kind of de facto way of outing you if, for no other reason, if someone didn't know about your sexual orientation, if you were just frozen at rank, I mean, it was kind of a known thing. So it was so humiliating to be so dedicated and yet so discriminated against.
By doing what you've done to me does not encourage anybody to come forward. In fact, they've gone in the closet deeper. They know what I've gone through.
And finally, the last question he asked was, how do you make love to a woman? And I got pissed and I told him, bring me your wife and I'll show you. And that was the end of the interview.
And I mean, they would read people's mails. They would tap phones. They would do everything that you can imagine a spy unit would do just to entrap someone who was gay or lesbian, because they wanted to find out if they were. There was always this myth that the reason that lesbians and gays can't be in the military was because they were susceptible to blackmail. Right? This was their main reasoning. And yet, I had more men come on to me in the military than I certainly did women. I mean, women were too afraid to act on this stuff. So, I mean, I was more harassed and with, married men that, married men who were more susceptible to blackmail than lesbians and gays were.
You'd have to understand the types of questions, the insistency, the repetition of it. They psychologically were breaking these people down. They would repeatedly ask questions, like the same questions, the degrading questions, over and over and over again. And it wouldn't be just for one day, it would be for multiple days, continuously. And if you put yourself in any foot of an 18, 20-year-old, 25-year-old person, if you just imagine pulling one off the street today and sticking them into a small room, I think, and doing that to them, I think we would call it torture today.
Back in the 70s, they used to punch us like this a lot. At basic training, during parade practice, so your feet were not perfect, so it would go like this. And at night, you count all the bruises, or they would hit your leg with their pace stick because your feet were not perfectly placed, but not more than this. So this guy pointed at me for 2.5 hours with a big light in my face. Then they play good cop, bad cop. I am almost an MP, so I've learned all those techniques.
You can't do this to me. That was not part of that culture. It still isn't today. You can't do this to me. It's that underlying ideology that the military can do what they want anytime they want. That 24/7 for national security is sort of the ideology that underlines everything.
And I remember telling them in one of the interviews, I said, you can't do this. I said, this is Canada. And he looked me in the eye and he said, we're the military. We can do what we want.
I was not really strong. So I was very intimidated. So I was not the one saying, hey, how did you find out? Or do you have proof or anything like that? I didn't know how to defend myself. I didn't have a lawyer to defend me beside me. They did everything against the law when you think about it, because you're supposed to have someone that helps you, with your rights.
I think what people need to remember is how young these people were. They were 18, 19, 20 years old. They were very young people. They were a long way from home.
And when you feel they know, I remember I looked at the wall and I said, I'm giving up. I'm telling them I am gay. Yes, and I remember saying, P, whatever. I'll take the consequences. But then, right then, I thought the consequences will be nothing. I'm a good soldier. I do everything the way I'm supposed to. Nothing will happen. You don't know the future. So I gave up. I told them the truth. And when you tell them the truth, You can't untruth.
They start asking me about other young women that I knew that were lesbian. And they go through every single one of them.
I did fail the lie detector test. That they pointed out to me that I had failed it, and then I wasn't telling them the name of the people, so they just threw this piece of paper on my pad and a pen and told me to write names, and I just wrote names, any name. Didn't necessarily mean they were on the base. It was just any name that came up to my mind. Nobody in particular.
The main thing they wanted names of other people. And when they asked if I knew, I said yes. And they got out a piece of paper and a pen, and I said, "You've got me, you're not getting anyone else." Like, I didn't want to take other people down. I did not want to be the cause.
I didn't want to be the one. The reason I didn't want to lead them to anyone else.
But for me to be in that room, somebody had to talk. So that they would come and get me. So there was suspicion already that I'm gay.
CFAO 1920 gave them all the right to do anything to detect us and kick us out.
They know everything. Who you're with, what you said, where you went, every single second of your life, they know.
3 questions were, are you homosexual? Are you bisexual? Or are you heterosexual? And I said, well, you and the military police and the SIU have all been investigating me now for 6 months. You know what I am.
We were all being purged. They were looking at us. It was chase the queers.
And then they start reading the last month of my life. They followed me for a whole month.
They told me that I was a lesbian and that it was no place in the military for people like me.
So they followed me in Toronto. They told me the hotel name, my room number, who I was with. So I know I was done.
It was like a movie. It was like a movie. But in the movies, they take actors. They don't use teenagers. I was a teenager. I was a kid.
And at that moment, I cracked. I cried. I was shaking like this. Couldn't believe my life was over. I cried so much that the medic said, we cannot release her today. She's in shock. So she said, we'll take care of her and we'll let you know when she can be released. So I trusted her, so I followed her. Figured that they were gonna take me in the hospital for a day or two, the time that I come down. But we ended up in Saint Joseph Hospital in psychiatry.
He said, you'll have to go see the psychologist on a regular basis, and then we'll determine from there. So they kept sending me there once a month.
The next thing they did was ask me if I was willing to take rehabilitation. And I thought, is that going to be shock treatment? And he goes, we're not here to discuss treatment. Are you willing to take rehabilitation? I said, well, I'm not sick.
Schizophrenia, personality disorder, borderline disorder, latent adjustment to adolescence.
All I remember is getting a shot. And after that, it's blurred for 2.5 months.
I had 2 stays on the psych ward. The first time maybe 30 some days, and after that, 85 days or 84 days. So five electroshock treatments were given to me. And another five of them have been documented on the medical file. They omitted the 5 others.
So I stayed in psychiatry, and days went by and days went by. And one day in March, my partner showed up, and he says, Lucy, they want to release you today. So I'm here to get you. I said, just get me out of here. So I had to put my uniform back because I got in there in uniform. So I put my uniform back, signed all the paper, and walked out.
I still have the letter saying he diagnosed homosexuality and that I could not be cured of it. Therefore, I could not be rehabilitated. That my release under CFAO 1920 was fully, how do you call that? It was fully confirmed.
1989, I was released honorably by the military as being, I really have to get this correct because it's so outrageous, not advantageously employable due to homosexuality.
The release orderly room was busy, and so they asked me to type up my own release docs.
While I was being investigated, I was up for promotion. And I was called into my sergeant's office. And the sergeant had all the promotions piled up there, mine on top. He says, "You're being promoted. Congratulations." But picked up the promotion and ripped it up in my face and said, "You won't be needing this where you're going."
So we got to headquarters, and everything was done. All the paperwork was done. All I had to do is sign here, sign here, sign here. But I was paraded from office to office because everybody knows I'm being released under the CFAO 1920. So it felt like I felt like shit, being paraded like this from office to office to do my clearing out. So once it was done, I had to stop at the MP station to give back my badge. And that was the worst thing. I was crying so much. And I have to give to a warrant officer my badge. So I give it to him and walked out, and the gate opened, and I was a civilian.
This, for me, that moment in my life, there was a lot of event. That was the event that I have the most difficulty remember all, because I was so triggered. I was so like the floor open under your feet, that I feel like something, I lost it. Like in my head and my self-esteem, everything like crash.
I knew that there were rapes that went on, there were sexual assaults that went on. And the military kind of turned a blind eye to it because they were so busy chasing queers and letting the boys be boys. And that was acceptable.
I went to the mess hall to meet some friends for having a drink to say, you're going to be leaving, And some young corporal put a drug in my glass and drugged me. And I left with him, and they tried to stop me, but I can't remember because I was drugged, and he raped me. And I woke up in his apartment the next day and couldn't figure out why I was there. And he told me why I was there and why he had raped me, to show me what it would be to be with a man. And I'm saying, like, okay. I ran out of there and I'm walking home and I'm saying to be with a man. That's what it is.
Okay, this is difficult for me to talk about. One of the backlash, I don't know how to find another word for it. People knew I was there because I was waiting to be court-martialed, because I was part of that group of lesbians. So one night, I was raped by 3 soldiers, telling me that it's because I never knew what having a big one was. To this day, I still don't know who these guys were, because they blindfolded me.
It was a scenario from a horror story. To think that people supposedly in their right state of mind would do that to a child, it's unreal.
It destroyed everything for me of the reality. Because when I went out of there, for me, it was the world and me. I was not part of it. I was just excluded of it. So I could not trust nobody. I was like, I felt so dirty. I felt like I let down my whole family. I was like, what am I gonna do with this? And it was they kicked me out 2 days after my birthday in December, and all the time, just before Christmas. I remember arriving in Montreal and not knowing what to do, and you don't even want to come and live here. You don't want to go live nowhere. You don't want to see your family. You don't want to see your friend. You don't want to talk about it. You just want to forget. So the best is drugs, alcohol, drugs. Let's forget. I don't want to talk about it.
I actually, en français on dit sevrer, clean my system of pills by myself in my apartment. I got there, I owed 2 months rent. I had all kind of bills, hydro and stuff. And all I did is I sat there and I cried for about a week. But when they kicked us out, they told us, do not apply for a job that require a security clearance.
And I remember the first job I found was in a cafe called the Funambule on St. Denis Street. And I was doing orange juice and cheese and dishes. And I was there and I was like, God, how can you go from all up there to there just because you like someone? How can you be punished for that?
But even in the reports they made, they can't even conclude that I'm gay. They're not even sure. But it's like, we won't take a chance. It's all upside down. They say we have no proof of her sexual preference except of her own admission. I never admitted that. I'm not an idiot. I was young, but not stupid. From when she says, we are unable to give you a definite answer as to her sexual identity. So they themselves don't even have a clue if I am or not. There's absolutely nothing in there that says I'm not in good shape. But here, I can't function. This is so screwed up.
Yeah, this was my on-the-job performance evaluation that was done. And just basically says what I did in my job, and I was evaluated, like operating office machinery, very good. Perform warehouse operation, very good. Process material, very good. Perform clerical function in a supply facility, excellent. And there's lists and lists of this. And this was signed in 1st of March 1980. And on September 1980, I was released from the military. You know? So it's hard to understand why. You're doing a good job, but you're no good for us. You're no good to us.
It did leave scars on my heart and my soul. It would be so much easier if I was straight, because I wouldn't have to deal with this. And, you know, I tried to have boyfriends. I did, because you want to conform. You want to be like society wants you to be.
I have always felt that the military ruined my life. And I felt that being gay also ruined my life.
It was surreal. I still didn't believe it. I still didn't believe that it would happen. And I thought, well, I'll fight back and I'll do my grievance, and somebody somewhere will have a light bulb and say, this is stupid. Like, you don't release good soldiers. After a few years of fighting, and I went to the top of all levels that I could. Then I stopped and said, well, I have to earn my living now. And I lived as a robot, I think, not feeling anything anymore. Not feeling anything anymore. Just feeling that was me then and I'm nobody now.
I was a good soldier. I gave it my all. And I would have given my life for it. Absolutely. 110%. And that's how we were trained. You don't give just 50% of yourself. We want it all. And they took it all. But then they spit me out.
You know, we were good people. We were always good people. Beyond being good military personnel, we were just good, decent people who didn't deserve any of that.
I was an excellent soldier. I became homeless. I had no money. I couldn't come back to Ontario. And then I found out the only way that my family will accept me is if I marry my old girlfriend. So I married my girlfriend. And we had a family. That only lasted a little while. I was okay. But I'm gay. I'm not a straight man.
Because I felt ashamed for 38 years. Still feel ashamed about sort of betraying your country, like, because I was told I was a security risk. A threat to my country. And I sort of felt ashamed. So that was just something else. But slowly you learn to live with it, eh? So. But your family doesn't know why you're out of the military, and you can't tell them. You know, for my life, I told them that's all I want to do, and all of a sudden, why did you leave? Oh, well, I thought I'd try something new. So you become this actress, eh? Like this. Put a smile on your face, and life goes on.
They stole my life. What I have been versus what I should have been. I should have been the first female chief warrant officer in the MP trade. That's what I was going for. I never got over it. we all feel that pain at different level. You know, some they went through one investigation one time that they were questioned and they cracked right away and they were kicked out. You know, I fought for 4 years. They wanted us. We will mark. And that was it.
I tried to get parts of my file. I wanted the SIU investigative reports. DND took months to reply to me that they could not locate the files. And I kept saying no. I worked in records management. The files just don't disappear.
It's my impression that the RCMP and the Department of National Defense have not been as forthcoming as they ought to be. I think that the Department of Justice people that we're dealing with are honorable people. I think they are negotiating with us in good faith. But I have good reason to believe that they may not be getting the level of cooperation from the RCMP and the Department of National Defense that they ought to receive.
They have all of those records. Military does not destroy records, ever.
Thousands of people were investigated. The RCMP gave an annual report. The last one we've seen, they had 9,000 people under investigation.
It was a war against us. We should get retribution for that.
Now, the odd thing is, and I interviewed a lot of those Mounties, and I don't remember them ever coming across a case of a homosexual being successfully blackmailed. Even the Mounties themselves felt badly about it, you know, and because it was such a travesty.
It's very clear that our government is committing to acknowledging and recognizing our legislation, programs, and policies that contributed to injustices and discriminations against LGBTQ Canadians, and that our government will apologize before the end of 2017.
I don't want an apology. I don't need an apology. I don't. The wound is too deep. The wound is too deep. It had sent my sisters and my brothers an arm to commit suicide. It sent them through deep into alcohol, into drugs. An apology. No, he may as well just go on his merry way.
For me, an excuse is an excuse. Won't change whatever happened for all those years. Because they knew what was going on. Nobody did anything about it. They just let it happen. I mean, this was not in solitary. This was not all hidden from everybody that were in charge. So what good is going to be an excuse and apologies? I mean, I've had so many apologies through life and it didn't change anything.
I think we all deserve to have someone witness our pain. We all deserve to have a voice. We all deserve to have someone hear what we have to say.
Any of us at any time can become a minority, depending on the political circumstances of the day. It's in all of our interests to look at things that happened in the past, injustices, to recognize them, to face up to them, to make amends for them, so that we can recognize today that this is who we were and who we are still and could one day become. It's in everybody's selfish interest to recognize persecution and prosecution of minorities in the past, because you might one day become a minority yourself.
We caused the damage as a country. We have a responsibility to make it right. I believe most Canadians are fair people, but they need to understand that it actually happened. That our country, not the United States, not the United Kingdom, not ISIS or some other horrible entity, the government of Canada and the RCMP and the Canadian Armed Forces pursued this policy of targeting gays and lesbians and investigating them and interrogating them and branding them as people with suffering from a character weakness and a threat to national security, and threw them out onto the street after they had volunteered to help our country. It was a disgraceful episode in our history.
All I want really is them to say, we did this, we apologize. They can use it was the philosophy back then, it was same thing in Civilian Street. They can use any excuse, I give them all to them. But just said, yes, we did it, we recognize it, and we apologize for it. And maybe I'll stop crying.
It is with shame and sorrow and deep regret for the things we have done that I stand here today and say, we were wrong, we apologize, I am sorry, we are sorry.
Well, the human response is wow. This felt great. For me, it was long time waiting for it. It's been a very long journey, and I'm very happy that we are all here today. To get this apology is not going to change what happened, but it will change my perception of who did it and how it happened, and it will change my perception of life and of my country.
This whole thing broke part of our soul. I think it broke the person that we were supposed to be to where we're supposed to go. I think it broke part of us. It'll always be broken. People that just wanted to be good. Just good. Just good. Nothing else. And we would have helped people all the time. And I noticed by talking to the people that were discharged like me, they were the best. And I was part of the best. And it shouldn't have happened.
It's time for people to know what happened. And I mean, a lot of people, like my family, that don't know that I've been through this. But that's okay. Other people have to know too. They need to know. It was not always nice. Canada did bad things to people, And they mistreated their soldiers, and people should know that. It's a part of history that should come out.
We've all done things at the end. What was I thinking? Why did I do that, you say? And when you get this together on a bigger stage with more people involved, things can get out of control. And I think that's what happened. And certainly that's what happened with the fruit machine. Nobody wants to take ownership of it now, The first time it ever became public was in the book Men in the Shadows. The first time anybody was ever interviewed about it openly was I was doing the interviews. And the reactions I got, people they'd rather not have that part of it. It's dark corner of their history kind of thing, you know? And how did I ever get involved in that? But it's easy to fall into that kind of thing, you know? And I think it's a lesson that we have to be vigilant.
And for sure, like anything, it's because we fight that things change. Because if we didn't talk about it, nobody would not even look at it.
The people that are gay now should be happy in the military. I'm happy for them, 'cause I would love to be them. Be happy, be who you are and be happy, and think that people in the past maybe didn't have it so easy. But if it helped to bring it okay now, it's good too.
59 years old and I go back. Well, now I'm too old, they don't want me.
I was there to defend my country. They knock at the door today and ask me if I would go and join, to go and combat somewhere. As crazy as it may sound, I'd go.
Yeah, the question was if after all of this, and I could go back to the army, would I? I would, absolutely. On a dime. No questions asked. With everything I know now, with my experience, yes. Yeah, I miss it. I still miss it. I will always miss it.
Well, if I had to do it over again, I would. No regrets. None. And somebody said to me, "You're getting old, or are you afraid of dying?" I said, "No, I'm not afraid of dying. I'm only sorry." Doubt. Yeah. Like so much has happened and so much is going to come. Yeah. The good times are coming.
So these were the initial questions that the government devised to try to help them determine who is gay.
They had a very weird way of looking at that, because I'm looking at that and it wouldn't determine that to me at all. I like adventure stories better than romantic stories, and that would say if someone was gay, like, no. They had weird stories. The thought of being in an automobile accident is very frightening to me. That would show that somebody's gay. Like, pardon me? I always tried to make the best school grades that I could. So if somebody said that there was an inkling they might be gay, I am inclined to take things hard. I don't know. But who thought of this? Might be someone that's hiding that they're gay. They don't want other people to know.